Sandy.
Okay, we'll give it, still got 3 more minutes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's virtual blended meeting of the Southwestern City School District Board of Education. The Ohio Legislature approved emergency legislation to allow school district boards of education to conduct meetings by teleconference or video conference, providing the meeting can also be observed by the general public. In order to comply with this requirement, tonight's meeting is being broadcast live on Zoom and also on the district's YouTube channel. Having received confirmation that the video is streaming correctly, Board of Education President, Mr. Robert Ragland, will now call the meeting to order.
And thank you for attending tonight's virtual blended meeting of the Southwestern City School District Board of Education, dated Monday, October 26, 2020. While the agenda will be visible during the meeting for those watching online, you may also follow along using the agenda posted on our website at www.swcs.us under the Board of Education tab. Please note that tonight's meeting may not run perfectly, but we are doing our best to keep things running smoothly as we continue down the path of virtual school board meetings. With that being said, I want to call the meeting to order.
Mr. Caldwell.
Here.
Mr. Donofrio.
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Schreiner.
He's muted.
Thank you. Somebody muted me. Here.
Mr. Ragland.
Here. And next up, I need a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Got a second? Second, Mr. Caldwell.
Mr. Donofrio.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Schreiner.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes. And next up, I need a motion for the approval of the minutes.
I'll move that. Mr. Schreiner?
Seconded by Johnson.
Mr. Schreiner.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell.
Yes.
Donofrio.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes. And next up, presentations. And we will have the Advanced Placement Scholars and National Merit Scholars presentation done by Mr. Eric Shuey.
Thank you, President Ragland, Vice President Johnson, members of the board, Dr. Wise and Mr. Garside. I'm excited. I think this is my 10th time giving this presentation, but my first time virtually. So I am excited to give this presentation every year because I think this really highlights some of the wonderful things that our community, our families, our teachers, and our students are doing in our schools for academic excellence. And I always like to start the presentation by showing a little bit about some of the history of our AP placement progress. And you can take a look at the numbers here on this slide. Because of COVID and the unusual circumstances in which we ended the year last year, we had quite a few amount of fewer students taking the exams. We had 528 students taking the exams who scored a 3 or higher. Let me rephrase. We didn't have a whole lot more students not taking the exams, but we did have fewer students. So even though we only had 873 exams taken, 446 actually scored a 3 or higher. I was looking at the wrong numbers there. Our percentage actually increased to 51%. So that is an increase over the previous years. And the exams were done a little differently. They were abbreviated with the same amount of rigor, but abbreviated. And the students were taking these in a secure location on their computers through home. So it is a little different, but anticipating that students will earn an average of 3 college credit hours for each assessment with a score of 3 or higher, and assuming the average college credit cost is about $500, the Southwestern City School District students earned more than $669,000 in college credits, which is quite a feat. And I'm going to add to that number here in a little bit because we've done a little bit more to save money for students and their families. But that's where we are now. So you see there was a slight dip in the student participation and student exams taken, but again, COVID. And we can go to the next slide. So the AP program offers several advanced placement awards every year to students. And in addition to receiving an award or certificate, this achievement is acknowledged on any AP score report that is sent to colleges the following fall. And we have this year 119 of our students, despite the difficulties with, again, COVID, who earned the AP Scholar Award this year, which I think is a feat in and of itself. And we're going to start with the advanced placement scholars. And this is granted to students who receive scores of 3 or higher on 3 or more advanced placement exams. And we had 53 students earning that this year. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to read every single name because we're going to hold the slide here for a little bit and you can take a look at the names of all the students who have earned this. And usually what we would do at this point is we would have those students come up, get their certificates. They would talk a little bit about where they are currently going to school. If they're graduated and they're going to college, they would tell us where they're going or where they're going to go and what their major is. So unfortunately, this year, we're not going to have that opportunity. And hopefully in the future, we'll resume that. It's one of my favorite parts of this presentation. So our AP Scholars with Honors this year are granted to students who receive an average score of at least 3.25 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 4 or more of these exams. And this year we have 18 AP Scholars with Honors district-wide. And these are those students. I'd like to congratulate all of them. Finally, there are AP Scholar with Distinction, and this is granted to students who receive an average score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more of these exams. And this year, we actually have more than we have had in the past. We've had 27 AP Scholars with Distinction district-wide, which is fantastic. So our national AP Scholars this year, we have 2. This is granted to students in the United States who receive an average score of at least 4 on all AP exams taken and scores of 4 or higher on 8 more of these exams. And to me, this is a mind-blowing achievement because of the sheer number of exams, the rigor of the courses, the commitment to taking the exams, And then the commitment to getting the 4 or higher, it's just unbelievable. And this year, we are very proud to recognize the following national AP scholars, and that is Jackson Ryan and Russell Zhu. So we really want to congratulate these 2 students for their outstanding accomplishments and all of their accomplishments, really. And just to put it in perspective, each year, approximately 1,500,000 high school juniors take these exams. And out of the National Merit Commended Scholars and semifinalists, out of that 1.5 million that take this National Merit Commended Students test, 50,000 high school scores are selected based on index scores. And this the sum of critical reading, mathematics, and writing skills. Now, of that 50,000, 34,000 are recognized as commended students. And of those 40,000, 16,000 are selected as national merit semifinalists. So this is, you had the AP exams. This is the national merit semifinalist. And this year we have the following student from Grove City, and that's Claire Collins, who has received the National Merit Semifinalist recognition. And we do have also a commended student that we would like to recognize, and that is Cameron Hayden. So these 2 students deserve, again, congratulations for a job well done. And it's quite an accomplishment if you think about the sheer number of students every year taking these National Merit scholarship exams. The final part of this presentation is something that we just started doing, I think, last year. And this is recognizing students who are really taking full advantage of the College Credit Plus program. So during the 2019-20 school year, 1,070 students took 2,780 college courses. Do the math on this, and remember, through the College Credit Plus program, the district picks up the cost of the tuition and the textbooks for the students that earn their eligibility into College Credit Plus program. So students are not only going to high school getting high school credits, they're earning college credits in addition to. So they're getting a real jump start on the number of credits and the amount of savings. And so assuming the average course is 3 college credits, and each college credit averages about $500, just through College Credit Plus alone, we've saved families more than $4,170,000 in tuition costs and approximately $150,000 in textbook costs. That, in addition to the AP exam savings, is really a phenomenal, staggering amount of money, close to $5 million through our rigorous programs and opportunities, all provided from the help of our Board of Education and the teachers and community at large that are part of this, are these opportunities. So this year, big deal, or last year, I should say, we had 4 students take advantage of College Credit Plus to the extent they earned associate's degrees. So basically, they graduated from high school, got their high school diploma, and also earned a minimum of 60 college credits that were provided through our College Credit Plus program. And that is such a wonderful feat and opportunity for these students. What a savings. And they are Damian Collins, Leah Ortman, Andrew Reniger, and Michael Schultz. So we want to really recognize that accomplishment as well. And that brings me to the conclusion of this presentation.
Right, and I'd like to give a round of applause and say congratulations to all of us.
Mr. President and Dr. Shuey, I would just like to say it amazes me to see that I still have students that I taught in elementary school that are on these lists. Then they would be surprised to see that I'm still alive, I guess. So that I'm really impressed. Fantastic College Credit Plus. Unbelievable. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Fine job. Now, next up, we're going to have our 5-year forecast, Mr. Hugh Garside.
Thank you, President Ragland, Vice President Johnson, members of the board. It's that time of year to present the 5-year forecast, the first 5-year forecast for fiscal years 2021 through 2025. As you know, the forecast is required twice a year. The first one being sometime by between October and the end of November. The second one has to be presented by the end of May. It also can be updated anytime when there's major financial changes that could happen throughout the year. But traditionally, we've only done it in October, November, and May. So the first slide I'd like to talk about, we're going to go over 4 slides. And the first one is overall revenues, expenditures, and cash balances. After that, we'll go over some revenue highlights. After that, expenditure highlights, and then we'll wrap it up with some comparisons to other Franklin County districts. Before I get started, that last presentation by Dr. Shuey, it really shows the importance of why we want to keep finances out of our hair and things that we don't want to have to think about in too much detail, because we want to be able to focus more of our energies on our programming, our staff, our leadership, and the things that we can do for our students. So it's always good to see presentations like Dr. Shuey's that just was presented, to see how wonderful and how excellent our students are progressing and some of the great things they're doing. It's really a pleasure to see that. So what I want to portray on this first slide is the blue represents revenues, red expenditures, and green cash balance. To get right down to the bottom line, it shows that we have a positive cash balance through fiscal year 2025. Obviously, you can see the green kind of decreasing over time. We do anticipate possibly going into deficit spending next fiscal year. As I've said before, the forecast is presented in a way that's pretty conservative in nature. 2% conservative in the revenue side and a 2% conservative in the expenditure side would mean about a $10 to $11 million bottom line difference. So it is a large difference when you think about it dollar-wise, but percentage-wise, that's where we want to be. We want to be conservative so we don't have any surprises. What I can tell you is we've always talked a lot about having a 3 to 6 month cash balance target. If you look at that presentation of our cash balance, that's anywhere from 3 to 9 months throughout the entire forecast. We're in good shape as far as where we stand with the cash balance. And hopefully we can keep it that way. This was probably the most difficult forecast that I've ever had to prepare. We have a lot of unknowns out there. We have the COVID situation. You have state budgets that's been a little bit in influx. You have federal funds coming in that are taking expenditures out of the general fund and out of the forecast. There's just a lot of things that have created a moving target as far as our finances go. But hopefully I can portray to you tonight just the work that we've done to put this presentation together and put this forecast together, that we are in decent shape and we are maintaining our cash balances that we have attempted to keep. So moving on to the next slide. I want to talk about some revenue highlights. Property taxes. Property taxes, as you may know, this is the triennial update year. So pretty soon you can go on your website right now. You can see what your home and businesses, what the value is going to be for those into the triennial update. There's a very strong housing market, even though the economy has slumped a bit. We still have a very strong housing market in our school district and Franklin County at large. What is anticipated by the Franklin County Auditor is roughly a 20% increase overall values in our school district. What I can tell you about that, I put a slide together a couple forecasts ago that showed the relationship between millage rates and assessed value. So when assessed value increases, millage rates go down, so you collect roughly the same. When the values decrease, back when the financial market crash hit, our millage rate increased. But then I showed you another overlay that showed that our property taxes stayed pretty much exactly the same. We will realize some growth in our inside mills. We have 3.85 inside mills. Overall, we have about 34 effective mills, so it's a smaller portion of that. So we will see some increase in that. But overall, I want to make sure that people understand that just because your property may go up in percentage wise, you're not going to see that same percentage increase in your actual tax bill. How it really works is it reapportions who pays what. So If the average is 20, if my property goes up 30%, I may pay a little bit more. Sometimes I get phone calls from those people. If the average is 20 and it goes up, my property only goes up 10%, my property taxes actually decrease. I don't get calls from those people because they think something's wrong that's going on. So, that's really how this whole assessed value and millage works together to present roughly the same amount of taxes that we receive each year, year over year. You have a unique circumstance in this forecast. I don't know exactly when this is going to happen, but I put it in this current fiscal year. We have Mount Carmel Hospital opened up their hospital and received their first tax bill from tax year 19 to be paid in 20. So they received a tax bill. They've applied for exemption, and they will get exemptions. Hospitals are exempt, an exempt status property, but they received a tax bill, and our portion of that was about $7 million. So we have $7 million in our bank account that really belongs to Mount Carmel. So I've accounted for it in this forecast. So what if you look at line 1.010, you're going to see a dip in property taxes, and then you see it going back up the next year. I don't know exactly the timing of that, when that's going to happen, but I just want you to know it's accounted for in here. How I kind of came across that, when we received our first half settlement in 2020, the numbers came in much higher than I anticipated. And I started thinking, why would this happen? Why would this happen? Why would this happen? What big has happened in our community? And just thought, well, the hospital's on there, but they're tax exempt. That shouldn't affect anything. So I dug down in the county auditor's website, went to their parcel and saw, oh, they got a bill and they paid it. So I assumed that they wouldn't pay second half, but they paid both halves. So we've received both half payments in calendar year 20, and we have that money, and they will be asking, they won't have to ask for a refund. The county will automatically give them a refund. So I don't know when that'll happen, but it should happen sometime within the next year or so, I anticipate. So it's accounted for. We know it's there, and that's why you see that dip in that line in the forecast. Next, I want to talk a little bit about unrestricted grants and aid, our state foundation funding. Overall, about 50% of our revenues come from that. As you may recall, House Bill 166 was passed in July of 2019, and that accounted for fiscal years 1920 and 2021, this current fiscal year. So we're in the second year of the biennium. We were kind of chugging right along with and it was all based on, we were going to receive the same amount of money we received back in 2018-19. So there's basically no increase in state funding in the new biennium. Well, that was prior to COVID hitting. And when COVID hit, they did budget cuts across the state, or revenue across the state for schools. And our portion of that is they cut us $3.4 million. The forecast that I did in May, I anticipated further decreases, but the state's economy has actually done okay. And the estimates that they thought they would receive as far as their tax revenues that they were going to receive has been pretty much, it hasn't been as bad as they thought. So they didn't cut us again this year. We're receiving the same amount received in 1920, we're receiving this year in 2021. So that was good for us. Did not cause us any issues. We did receive something, if you may recall, I talked about this in the last forecast, something called Student Wellness and Success Funds. For last fiscal year, it's about $5 million. This fiscal year, it's about $7 million. So $12 million total over these two bienniums. I expect that will continue in the future. The only difference is an accounting issue with those funds is those need to be accounted for into a separate fund, which is separate from the forecast. So you don't see any of the revenues or expenditures on here. Why that's different is that was really our increase in state funding back when this was put in place in House Bill 166. So that increase that we anticipated a couple forecasts ago went all into the Student Wellness and Success Fund, the separate fund. So one of the good things with this, because we didn't get, it's not like we had to create a whole bunch of new programming. We have been doing a lot for economically disadvantaged students and our at-risk population. So we were able to use purchase services and other items that we have been doing in the past for this at-risk population, we were able to use these new dollars to keep funding those programs that we've been doing before. So that was positive for us. So you'll see a corresponding decrease in purchase services for these expenditures. So that's kind of another new twist to the forecast that wasn't there before. Usually when we receive money from the state, we could count it all in our forecast, we could present it that way, but now it's kind of separate. So just wanted to make sure everybody is aware of that. Future projections, it looked pretty glum the last time when the first COVID numbers were coming out. But as I said, the state has kind of rebounded. Things have been going a little bit better. So most of the Franklin County treasurers, we've gotten together and talked about this stuff, and just kind of keeping the state revenue flat over the term of the forecast is pretty much what most are doing right now. So I'll be keeping a sharp eye on that. We'll have a new biennial budget coming forward, some new plans that are going to be looked at and talked about for the next biennium that will start in 2021. And one of the things I do want to talk about with that is the Cup-Patterson fair funding plan that was talked about, that was kind of put on the back burner for a while, is starting to get more discussion. As you know, Bob Cupp is now he's the Speaker of the House, and so he's in a position of power, and this was his and Patterson's plan. So this is something that's getting talked about and discussed. If you look at Southwestern's demographics, we usually shake out pretty good in any kind of funding formula that can be put together. And this funding formula, we would do pretty well with this formula. The issue currently that I see is that the funding to provide to make this work isn't in place. So there would have to be either a decrease in other effort from the state level to be put more money into the school funding system, or possibly increase in taxes somewhere. I don't know where they're going to get the money, but that's not for us to decide. I just want you to know that has popped up again. I believe it's a fair plan. It's a good plan. I think it's one that would benefit us, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how that progresses through the ranks and how that goes, because it is pretty interesting stuff, and I think it would be good for students and good for schools to help keep them off the ballot as much as they have been. So that's a good thing. I do want to also point out, you'll see a pretty significant decrease in all other revenues. We have about a $4 million anticipated reduction due to interest earnings alone from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021. There's a significant decrease in interest earnings. I want to kind of shed some light on that, why that has occurred. So we do have a pretty good cash balance right now. So if you have a pretty good cash balance and you can get some investments that are yielding some decent interest rates, you're going to earn pretty good interest revenue. We had our approach is to just ladder our investments out. So as they come due, we'll just reinvest those funds. With the market crashing to this extent, most of the securities that we were able to purchase were callable. So if the market's going down and you have an investment out there that's 2% and they know they can refinance that and get it at a lower percentage, then they're going to call that, and you're not going to realize that interest that you thought you were going to realize. So a lot of our investments were called. We had a lot of investments at 2.5% currently. So those 2.5% investments that got called, we're purchasing new investments at 11 basis points. So that's 0.11%. So you got 2.5% versus 0.11%. So that's tough. That just explains it pretty much. Hopefully that explains it, why our interest revenue is going down. So just wanted to put that out there. Now, hopefully, I'm projecting that interest revenue to stay pretty low throughout the forecast. Hopefully, as things clear up, get better, we'll start seeing those investment kind of creep up. And then we can reinvest those funds and do the same thing. We can reinvest those funds, because I have a lot of it in pretty short-term stuff right now in anticipation of better rates in the future. So good stuff there, hopefully. Move on to the next slide. talk a little bit about some expenditure highlights. We've talked about this a lot before. What we do is we provide services to kids and to our community through our staff. So not ashamed to say that 80% of our operating expenditures are on staff. That is where we provide our services. We have agreements in place, so we know where we stand with SWIA and SWA through 21-22 school year. So at the end of the school year and the end of the next school year, we know where we stand with those two groups. We have, as you remember, we approved a 1-year extension with OPSI that'll expire at the end of this fiscal year. So we'll be going into contract negotiations with them this spring. As you may recall, we received some federal funds, $6.4 million of federal funds through the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds. Once again, these are funds that we received that we can't account for within the forecast. So some of those expenditures that were in the forecast were moved to a federal fund. It kind of skews the trend. So you look at salaries going up just a blip this year and then going up more the next year. That's because some of those expenditures are pulled out of the general fund, out of the forecast, and into these federal funds. So it's just, it doesn't make for a smooth transition when you're looking at your forecast. You're like, wow, why is this number going up so much next year? That's because those expenditures were moved to a federal fund and now back up into the general fund and causing that kind of skewed look at it, I believe. Employee healthcare or employee benefits. Really the one that is most volatile for us is our health insurance benefits. Throughout the forecast, we look at national trends of 5.5% to 10%. So we kind of plan for that. Happy to say that the insurance committee met last week and looked at our claims that we've had. They look at where we are trending and how our own plan, because we are self-insured, looking at how we're doing as a district and maintaining our costs. And happy to say that our cost increase is 1.5%. So we're much less than the national trend. We've done some things with our new insurance consultants, Haran, to try to really nail down the pharmaceutical plan that we have and look at our contracts and making sure that when Aetna's putting through a pharmacy claim, that we're paying the right rates, we're getting the right rebates, we're holding them to their contract, and by really negotiating hard with them and doing those things, we've been able to keep our costs down. The trend nationally is, if you're looking at an overall trend of 5.5% to 10% just in overall medical claims, the real driver of that is pharmaceuticals. So we've done a really good job trying to hammer down on that and get better managed benefits on our pharmaceutical side. So I think that's a testimony to our consultants and also our committee to be on top of those things. So kudos should go out to our committee for making those, going through that stuff and making sure we're on our toes with that. Purchase services. I spoke about this a little bit ago, that we had that, a $5 million increase and then a $7 million increase in the student success and wellness funds. So those expenditures have moved out of there, so you can see a little dip in that line. That is why that's happened, and that maintains throughout the forecast, because for all intents and purposes, I believe that we will receive student wellness and success funds in the future. I believe that to be true. If it's not, then I think then we'll have to look at that. But I just want you to know that that's the way I look at it. I look at the revenue staying outside the forecast and those expenditures staying outside the forecast. If that changes in the future, they will come back hopefully with the revenue to support it. Materials and supplies. We have continued, we've ramped up because of the COVID situation, really ramped up our one-to-one, and we're at one-to-one right now for all our students. One device for every student, and we will maintain that. We have a commitment to that, and we're going to keep moving forward with making sure we have the funds available and the resources available to keep providing updated technology for students and staff district-wide. It's not just for students, it's our staff also. We replaced several of the boards and some other things throughout the district, and making sure that everything's working smoothly. From what I've heard, everything has gone pretty smoothly with our virtual school and also some of the things that we did last year when we had to move to the all online system. So things have been going well there as well. Capital outlay, we just did a big purchase for new switches and technology upgrade district-wide. The good thing about that, there's a substantial cost to that, but we're going to receive 80% of that back from E-rate. So we kind of leveraged the E-rate program to allow us to buy some new technology and get all that approved through E-rate. So we'll be seeing a check back from them after we make those expenditures and get those installed. So that's a good thing. Last but not least, on the expenditure slide, this year, May of 2021 will be our last payment for the win-win agreement. In the past, at its height, we've spent $1.2 million for the win-win agreement. That agreement was changed back in 2016, and then it was effective in 2017. And what it did is each year taking off 20% until we had one more payment in 2021, and now we're done with that. Everything stays in place with the agreement, so Columbus is not going to go after our properties. We're not going to go after their properties. There will be some shifts here and there, but it's not any of that change. Any of that change has nothing to do with what either Columbus City Schools or Southwestern City Schools is trying to do. These may just be unincorporated land that it's already spelled out. If that land is in Columbus and it starts getting water, that those tax dollars would then go to City of Columbus. But that's all, it's all land that's already been, that has been decided already. Last slide. Always like to touch on this a little bit, just to make sure everybody understands where this data is coming from. It's for tax year 2019, collection year 2020. So these are what the bills you've already paid, but this is the most recent information I have. So we're looking at residential class 1 properties. This is where the millage rate is pulling from. There's also one for commercial industrial, but that's a different rate. People resonate more with the class 1 rate because it's your house. So if you're looking at all levies, it could be operating, bond, PI, all levies, that's that far left column. Southwestern is 13th out of 16 school districts as far as what our overall millage rate is, 42.55. So you can see at the top, I won't name any names, but that's 15 mils more than we are. That's a pretty substantial difference. I'd say our taxpayers get a good bang for their buck. I will also like to point out the far right, Southwestern City Schools. This is our expenditure per pupil ranking. This is based on 2018-19 school year. That's the most current data that we have from the Ohio Department of Education. We are currently also on that 13th out of 16 school districts in Franklin County. We actually, if you look at the state average, we're actually roughly $1,200 less than the state average spending per pupil. Now, having a large school district, we can get some things through economies of scale. So we have some purchasing power. We have some ability to probably not have as much administrative staff. If you look at our administrative expenditures per pupil, we're much lower than other districts throughout the state. Because if you have a small school district, you still need one superintendent. So we have some economies of scale with our administrative staff as well. If you took that $1,200 per student and plugged it into our number of students we have, we would be spending roughly $24, $25 million more than we're currently spending per year right now. So I think we do a nice job with our expenditures. We do a nice job of keeping our millage rate low for our taxpayers. Remember, we haven't had an operating millage since 2009. We were supposed to stay off the ballot until 2013. It's now 2020. As you can see from our forecast, we don't have any current plans to be back on the ballot for any operating issues. So I think that's a testimony to what we've done as far as a board, what we've done as administrative and our staff. Everybody's been on the same page to make sure that we provide the best education we can at the most affordable price. And I think we've done a great job with that, and real proud of the district for what we've done in the past and what we hope to continue to do in the future. All that being said, I will happily answer any questions that anybody might have at this time.
Any questions?
I had one, Mr. President. You mentioned Mount Carmel and their taxes. Am I off? What was the time frame? We also have another hospital, right? We have Ohio Health.
Yes, Ohio Health, they got their tax exemption approved, so they did not pay their taxes. They didn't owe taxes, they didn't get a bill, they didn't pay them, so.
Gotcha.
It's just a timing thing. This is not, it's no fault of Mount Carmel's. It's a timing thing based on when and how far along your asset is coming up out of the ground. It really is a timing issue. They could have chosen not to pay their tax bill and it would have been excused, but I think they thought it was in their best interest to just go ahead and pay it and then receive that refund back. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? Fine job as usual, Mr. Treasurer.
Amen.
And next up, Fiscal and Operational Management, Mr. Lee Schreiner.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, we only have 2 items for fiscal and operational management. The first, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the 5-year forecast as presented by Mr. Garside just a few minutes ago, Exhibit X1. And I would just like to add that Mr. Garside explains it in a way that we can all understand it, and that is so greatly appreciated. And secondly, if I can click on it here, it is recommended the Board of Education enter into an agreement with the Ohio Provider Resource Association, OPRA, to provide junior and senior high school students an alternative pathway to high school graduation for the 2020-21 school year, Exhibit X2. After reviewing these 2 items, Mr. President, I move them for passage.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Schreiner,
Yes.
Mr. Donofrio.
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes,
Mr. Ragland.
Yes. And next up, we have Personnel, actually Policy, Vice President Kathy Johnson.
thank you, President Ragland. We have just one item tonight, and it's a resolution to waive just a portion of policy 2430.02 having to do with extracurricular eligibility. We did this back in the spring for spring sports, and we need again to do it for sports that are coming up. Having reviewed this item, I move it for passage.
Got a
Second, Reiner.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes,
Mr. Schreiner,
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Donofrio,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes. And next up, Facilities Development, Mr. David Donofrio.
Thank you, President Ragland. Good evening, everyone. On tonight's agenda for Facilities Development, we have one item to approve the East Franklin Elementary School modular floor coverings change order in an amount not to exceed $6,000. Having reviewed this item, I recommend its passage and move to do so at this time.
Do you have a second?
Second, Schreiner.
Mr. Donofrio,
Yes.
Mr. Schreiner,
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Johnson.
yes,
Mr. Ragland.
Yes. And then next up, we have Personnel, Vice President Kathy Johnson.
thank you again. On the board agenda this evening are 4 personnel items involving 39 persons. These include 6 certificated administrative resignations, 28 certificated employments, 4 classified resignations, and 1 message of condolence for a deceased staff member, Abdullahi Farah, who's been employed in the district since 2010, where he has served as the bilingual assistant at Park Street Intermediate. Having reviewed these items, I move them for passage.
Second, Anthony Caldwell.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Mr. Donofrio,
Yes.
Mr. Shriner,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes. And next up, items for discussion. Have any? And then also next up, need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell,
Yes.
Donofrio,
Yes.
Mr. Shriner,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you all very much. Always remember, wear your mask, wash your hands, maintain social distancing. Thank
And
you.
vote.
Vote.
And vote. Okay.